All right, academic ambassadors for peace, academicians, notable influencers of the global human family. Welcome to this webinar. We are at this program sponsored by the International Association for Academicians for Peace, a project of the Universal Peace Federation, UPF, founded by Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, often called the Mother of Peace, together with her late husband, Reverend Sang Myang Moon. And in this seminar, in this program, we're going to focus on population. Most people fear that 8 billion people population will increase to double again, and without end, it's causing a lack of resources, no food, and all these things that come from cramped living quarters. Yet, like a booming stock market, this wave will pass. Even when it goes up, nobody thinks it will. According to the people who know, scholars, and according to the UN, in the World Population's Prospects from 2 weeks ago, the global population is growing now at its slowest rate since 1950. Rich industrialized nations are getting older, yes, but no babies, except for Israel. Western Europe and US survive because people want to move there. There are many difficulties in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, China, and other nations. Next year, for example, India will surpass China in population. So today's webinar is called The Global Population Crisis, What Asia Can Learn from Israel. I'm sure our speakers will cause many burning questions to pop up. So please type them in the chat, and we'll do as many of them as we can after the presentations, of which we have 2. First, to separate fact from fiction, is Daniel A. Hess. He's an activist and speaker on family formation. He graduated as an engineer from Cornell University in 2000 and is a professional in intellectual property and patents for over 2 decades. He's also an activist demographer, studying the causes for the global fertility decline and working on a book currently on that topic. He's married and with his Asian wife, a father of 6. Daniel, kindly unmute. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm gonna try to go ahead and start this. Let's see. Okay, just a second.
All right.
Are you're able to see this?
We see your file, all the secret files you have here. It's very interesting. Yes.
Can you see my presentation here?
Nope, not yet.
Let me.
Yeah. Okay, you're on.
All right.
Slideshow. Do slideshow on from beginning.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, everyone. So what we have, can everybody see the full screen here? Yes. Okay. So the title of the presentation is Lessons for East Asia from Israel, How to Have a Culture of Having Children in a Modern Urbanized Country. So fertility is the crisis of the modern world. Replacement fertility is regarded as 2.1 births per woman. In almost every developed country, fertility has fallen far below this. What are the effects of very low fertility? We have economic stagnation aging populations are much less innovative, and ultimately you will have national decline. So, and here we can see to our right, we can see a chart of what has happened to fertility over time. So the latest fertility rates in China, Japan, and Korea are now around 1.16, 1.26, and 0.77 births per woman, respectively. These are among the lowest birth rates in the world. You can see how just since 1970, fertility rates have absolutely plummeted in country after country around the world. Almost every country, once it becomes developed and rich, sees its fertility rate fall far below replacement and stay there. But there is one exception that we can see on this chart, and that is Israel. Israel has a fertility of 3 births per woman, which is almost 4 times as high as South Korea. So Israel is a young and growing country, while East Asia is old and shrinking. And here we can see a comparison of a population pyramid for Israel and for Japan. And I use Japan as an example, but China and Korea would be very similar. And what you see is you see Israel has a very you can't just simply look at the population of a country, because that really doesn't tell you deeply what's happening in the country. But if you look at the population at each different age, you can get a much closer idea of what's happening across the country. And we can see that Israel is a young and growing country with a very bright future. We can see that Japan, and you would see again something similar with China and Korea, are shrinking in fact dramatically. And so Israel is very similar to low fertility East Asia, but Israel has very high fertility. And why is that? Now, some of the similarities are Israel is extremely urban, even more urban than Korea, China, or Japan. Israel is a very rich country with a very high GDP per capita, even higher, in fact, than Korea, China, or Japan. And Israel is modern and feminist. Now, all of these factors would tend to suggest that a country has very, very low fertility, and every country that fits this profile has a very low fertility. But Israel has these characteristics and has a very high fertility. Now, why is that? And I would say the first thing to know about Israel, the first lesson, if you will, is that Israel simply has the goal of having more children. What is Israel's secret? There is no secret. Israelis have more children because that's what they want. Is it that simple? In some sense, yes. That is the simplest and most clear answer that somebody can give why Israel has such a high fertility rate while other countries have a low fertility rate. Now, Israel's history, of course, is one of heartbreak and terrible tragedy that we all know about. And I have heard some close Jewish friends of mine tell me how the idea is to have one more for those that were lost. Now, that's a very moving thing. So in some sense, Israel's example is not quite replicable, but on the other hand, Israel does teach us that if a country has a deep purpose to have more children, then it can, even if the country is rich, modern, and urban. But what happened in East Asia? So East Asia had messages against having children. While Israel was encouraging people to have children, China, Japan, and Korea all had messages encouraging population control, because there was fear in the air, and in the culture of overpopulation. And that message went out for decades. And if you want to counteract that, you need messages that encourage people to have children, again, over a very long time. And in addition, you also have a global narrative of overpopulation, which now is generally false, but that message remains. So while Israel was encouraging people to have children. East Asian countries, including Japan, Korea, and China, all had population control messages that need to be counteracted. A second message that Israel has is national pride. National pride now, we all know, gets a bad rap, but Israel shows a good side. Jewish people believe they are special, chosen, and that propels them to want more children and accomplish great things. Isn't that a great way to think? And East Asians also have a great deal to be proud of. Rich cultures going back thousands of years, the brilliance to make every product that we use. And like Israel, people in Japan and China should feel great national pride. While national pride can be a negative thing, in the case of Japan, Korea, and China, I think there's a good case to be made that they have too little national pride. A third lesson from Israel is religious faith. In Israel, religiosity is the driver of fertility. Religious belief gives people a reason to want to have children, gives a sense of optimism and purpose. And in this chart, we can see this is on the x-axis we have birth cohort. So that's the year that a woman was born, and on the y-axis is the number of children. And so you can see that among the most religious people in Israel, fertility is extraordinarily high, 6, 7, and 8 births per woman. But what is remarkable as well that you'll notice in this chart is that even among secular women in Israel, the fertility rate is 2.4, 2.2 to 2.4 births per woman, which is far higher than it would be in most other countries, which shows that culture that comes most strongly from the deeply religious in Israel permeates throughout the rest of the country. So, and here, this is a chart on the left, fertility rate by religious attendance. And you can see again that those who attend church more often tend to have far more children. I believe this chart is from the United States, but the pattern is true all over. And the nations of China, Japan, and Korea all have low religiosity. In Korea in particular, religiosity has dropped significantly over the last 2 generations. And when I talk about religiosity, I'm especially referring to the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which particularly encourage people to have children. So we know that couple on our right. That is Tevye and his wife from Fiddler on the Roof. So a fourth lesson from Israel is arranged marriage. Now, when I studied this, I didn't realize that arranged marriage is still a current and vital thing in modern Israel, but actually among the Orthodox in Israel, matchmaking or arranged marriage is alive and very well. And under the title is what is called as shidduchim. And it's a very modern form where parents and matchmakers help to make introductions, and the couple meets and decides whether to marry. And the advantages of this is that it wastes very little time, gets right to the point. It's very efficient, and also it's totally optional. So whereas arranged marriage might have a connotation from the past of being perhaps somehow oppressive or limiting, in fact, as a choice, it's not limiting, but it's another free choice that people can make, and it's a very popular option. And it encourages marriages. Lots of marriages in Israel happen this way. And so there's a big lesson for East Asian countries like Japan, Korea, and China. Arranged marriage was once the norm, and meanwhile, modern dating does not seem to be working for a very large share of people in Japan, Korea, and China. And marriage rates are at all-time lows. So why not try what worked? And if Israel, which is an incredibly modern, a highly developed country, can have matchmaking as an available option, it may not be, such a primitive thing after all. Why not bring it back as an option for the very large share of people who could certainly benefit? Another factor that I found in studying Israel is the age of marriage. In Israel, the average age that couples get married is 26, whereas in Korea it's 32, and in Japan it's 30 and a half. And the Institute for Family Studies explains the relationship between age of marriage and fertility rate. Delays in marriage until later in life do not simply reduce the number of years available for childbearing, they make it more difficult to conceive in the first place. And marriage ages have risen substantially in East Asia while fertility rates have plummeted. Israel's story suggests if you move toward earlier marriage, you can have quite a bit higher fertility rate. And so who knows the person on the upper right? That is Israel's #1 star. That is Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot. I had to check the pronunciation of that, Gal Gadot. There she is with her very lovely family, 3 children so far, a beautiful growing family. And so if you want to have a family culture, the biggest stars set the tone. Now here we have the most popular pop group in the entire world. If you recognize that, that is the Korean pop group BTS. And I saw a group at our Thanksgiving celebration, a dance group doing some of their dance moves, and incredibly popular. But do these East Asian pop stars model a marriage and family culture? They do not. They are usually single or hide their private lives. If this is the fashion in East Asia, is it any wonder that there's a high rate of childlessness? And I have to credit demographer Lyman Stone, who made this point about Korea. Okay, a 7th lesson from Israel is, in Israel, large families are normalized in Israel, and that of course would be an ultra-Orthodox, a very large ultra-Orthodox family we see in this picture. In Israel, a certain fraction of the religious have very large families, and the result is that this kind of rubs off on everyone else, so that even atheists and people that are not of faith in Israel have a lot more children than they otherwise would, because this, some people having very large families sets a culture. Meanwhile, we see in Japan, Korea, and China, the norm has been set to very much smaller families, and even a family of 4 children in Japan or Korea or China would be very strange. If these countries want to have higher fertility, you need to break this norm of tiny families. If some bold people show the way with very large families, that would adjust the idea of what a normal family looks like upward for everyone. Now, this is an 8th lesson from Israel is fewer C-sections. I have to credit demographer Lyman Stone, who I think I would argue is one of the greatest living demographers. And he studied the rate of C-sections in a country and compared that to fertility. And that was one of the largest factors of all in terms of the number of children that people have. And this makes sense because many studies show 2 things. First, having a C-section reduces future fertility, and also women choose to have few births after a C-section because of perceived risk. And lo and behold, the rate of C-sections in Israel is among the lowest in the OECD. It has the lowest in the OECD countries, the lowest out of 34 countries, and the highest birth rate. Meanwhile, Korea has a 452 C-sections per 1,000 births, which is among the highest in the world. And lo and behold, it really does look like these elective C-sections that are so common in Korea are very likely dramatically reducing the fertility rate. So there's an interesting lesson from Israel that's not widely considered, but should be. And now, of course, I'm not talking about necessary C-sections. That necessary C-sections are a tremendous blessing, but it's also elective C-sections, on the other hand, can dramatically reduce a country's fertility. So in conclusion, I think Israel gives tremendous hope to East Asian countries that they can regain a culture of having children. It's, in fact, Jewish fertility several generations ago was the lowest in the world. About 100 years ago, fertility rates among Jewish people were among the lowest, and now they are, now Israel has the highest fertility of any developed country. There are many factors, of course, but the most important factor is that in Israel, having children is a national goal. Israelis believe deeply in the importance of having children, and that's the biggest factor. And if Japan or China or Korea can once again decide that having children is one of the most important things in life, the problem will solve itself. The rest is details. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
A lot of material there. I really appreciate everybody hanging with me, but these are there's so much information here, and I'm really so eager to share, because Israel is an incredible example of bucking a very powerful global trend that we can all learn from. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate your succinct presentation. You did pack in a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you have materials for another one as
sure.
This one.
Sure.
Well, next time. Maybe.
Not now. But there's there is such a wealth of knowledge out there. So I'll try to answer some questions as well.
Yeah, well, I look forward to see all your questions pop up here in the chat box. And for the next segment, our next presenter, we're going to get the real story from a person on the ground, a mother living in Israel. It's experiencing this in her own life. Adi Sasaki, she is a UPF Secretary General, and she has been the director of the Jerusalem Forum for Peace and Security since 2012. She's an expert in Chinese medicine. She owns a clinic for the treatment of women and children. She and her Japanese husband have 5 children. So you better listen to mommy here. She knows what she's talking about. So bring out the heart here. Let's hear from Adi. Kindly unmute.
Hi. Thank you, Stefan, for your nice presentation, and thank you for having me here. Yeah, everything is true. I'm happy to be here, and I would like to start with just a small a slide to show and to talk a little bit about the facts, and then I will share a little bit more from my own experience and point of view. Just I want to mention in the beginning that I'm not an expert, you know, like Daniel has much more knowledge and research. I'm just doing it and being here, you know, so I can share what I know from my experience and what I feel. So I will share my screen. For a minute.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, can you see?
It's
okay,
there.
So yeah, thank you. So it's just one slide to really show us that how the amazing fact and big difference of the Israeli birth rate average, which is 3.1, compares to all others OECD countries. Even though it's from 2015, it's rather same data effects for today, like Daniel mentioned. So I want to mention why is it like this. Yeah, I will share some. I prepared some words more explaining all of my what I want to share with you. I think it's when Daniel actually related more to the high average of birth rate in Israel that comes from the more Orthodox families, more religious-oriented families, or ultra-religious-oriented families, which is correct. They have about an average 7 children for a family. I'm more representing the secular area, although I'm a strong believer and I have my faith, but I'm not belong to that stream. And my parents also didn't belong. I have 2 brothers. We're a 3 children's family, and this is really the average and kind of very normal in all our society, also the secular one. So I will relate to what we saw in the diagram, and then I will continue with my own few words. So fertility in Israel stands at 3.1 children for women, the highest fertility, as we know, in the OECD. Not only Israel's fertility high among developed countries, it is also higher than fertility rates in emerging economies. In fact, despite a magnitude of differences in other areas, including GDP, Israel's fertility is more similar to that of its direct geographic neighbors, Egypt and Syria, which we must mention that they are Muslim Arabs, and then they are developing countries, not developed countries. People often mention 2 factors that encourage Israel's high fertility: the cultural aspect, which is encoded in the historical experience of the Jewish people, and particular policies that make it easier for Israeli women to balance work and family, such as leave for sick children, reduced working hours following the return from maternity lives, and part-time flexible position. Yet these arguments are less convincing when we compare Jews in Israel to their counterparts elsewhere. Although they share the same history, fertility among Jews in every other developed countries is considerably lower, including among Jews living in Europe, where welfare policies are more generous than in Israel. Another argument is that Israel's fertility is driven by certain parts of the population, such as Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, as we shared, and Daniel shared, that they have around 7 children per woman. However, the rise in Israelis' fertility over the last 2 decades has been largely driven by the secular and traditional Jewish populations, whose combined fertility rate is greater than 2.2, which is itself higher than the overall fertility in any other of the other OECD countries. Among the Arab-Israeli population, fertility trends have followed patterns similar to those in the rest of the modern world, decreasing significantly since the 1960s, in conjunction with increased education levels and employment participation rates among women. Furthermore, Israel's fertility is not only exceptional because of it is high, it is also exceptional because strong pronatalist norms cut across all educational classes and levels of religiosity, and because fertility has been increasing alongside a rise in the age at which women first give birth and increasing education levels, at least in the Jewish population. From an international perspective, these are extremely unusual patterns. And so I think that it's kind of a mystery that in Israel, although the fertility age of women is going higher, and they are more educated and actually the women in Israel are working very hard. I think it's like the second country in the OECD women are really working in the working hours of women, still they are insisting of having children and family. And I think that the point is that that we believe, we feel, we have this phrase in Israel, Yiladim em simcha, children are happiness, and children, having children equals being joyful. And I grew up with this, and it's very natural and normal to have a family, big family. I think there are also other couple points that contributes and affect to this point, to this fact. I also, it's related to what Daniel said, and I want to mention the atmosphere in Israel is supportive in raising children because it is also a tribal society. There's big families, and there's a lot of support from the grandparents, from the sisters, and from friends, because of the common atmosphere of having big family or having families. You know, for us it's normal to have 3 children, as I said before, and more together. So there's a lot of relationship support and help with neighbors and others. Also, I think that something very that is very influencing is that as a nation, it's not only people, it's not only having a goal to have more children, but there is, our greater goal is a feeling of connection to our nation and to our land. And this feeling that when we have a big population, we have just our strong people, strong nation. We are stressing the nation, and it helps to create it and enlarge it to the future. We are also, all of our children serve in the army usually, not the ultra-Orthodox, but the secular ones. And we are very connected also to this patriotic aspect of connect to our land and country. And so I think this really gives a nationalist point of view to the nationalist connection to our desire and love to the family. And I will conclude with the fact that I think that Israel usually, you know, there is a rate of happiness rate of nations, and then Israel is always is somewhere in the 13th, 15th, somewhere there. We are always considered as a very happy people, though we have a very troublesome area, you know, and and the economical is not always great, and it's expensive to live here. But I think that what makes us a happy nation relatively is having a family. So it's really contributes to this, to one each other. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adi, for allowing us to hear your take on family in Israel. You know, there are, of course, you just kind of scratch the surface of this. And one question that came up in the chat here is a comparison with the Palestinian and Jewish the camps, or as a whole. Are those segments of the population, do they have different data about their viewpoint of children, or is it basically similar? Or do you know about that?
Adi, do you want to try, or I can answer if
yes,
if
please,
you like.
please, Daniel. Yes.
Sure, okay. Sure. So yeah, that is an interesting point, and there, you know, there was you know, over time a kind of a national question for Israel, because if it, you know, what's going to happen if the Palestinian fertility rate is much higher than the the Jewish fertility rate. You know, so there is a question of kind of the national survival, if you will. But actually, what has happened is that the Palestinian fertility rate, it's still higher than many countries, but it's actually, I think, a little bit lower actually than the Jewish birth rate. But in any case, not substantially higher, although it had been in the past. So that was a, you know, I think it's probably true that was a motivator for Jewish people in Israel to have more children. But it is remarkable that the Israeli birth rate is actually now slightly higher than the Palestinian birth rate, which the Palestinian birth rate has just come down naturally, as it has with almost every country in the world. That's been a natural trajectory. What is really remarkable is that hasn't been true for Israel in general, and the Jewish population, that their fertility has actually increased since the 1970s, which is opposite to every other country in the world.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And something else here we have in the chat is does the service of people in the army, does that impact the family formation? I know that if you compare Korea and Israel, they both have long obligatory service, and even in Israel, also women serve,
Yes.
though not in Korea. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there a segment of the population based on faith that do not serve? Or
Yes.
is it, who are those?
The ultra-Orthodox, they don't serve the army, neither men or women.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also there is an option from the more religious, not ultra-Orthodox, so their boys, they do serve, but the girls, they make kind of national service. They contribute to the nation in a different aspect. They don't serve as soldiers, but they do contribute. Yeah.
Well, I did see many young women together with young men with the Uzis when I was there. So hope it's.
I had an M16 in my age.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. Well, watch out. Anyway. And another question that is brought up in our kind of leading on from our other seminars is that in Korea there is a kind of a culture of you have to study really hard. Like in Korea, you have to study so hard day and night, and then you have to work really hard, long hours. People in Israel are not uneducated, and they work hard, yet they have family. So is there a different, how is a policy from the company viewpoint to families? Are there families in the way, or do they give allowances for mothers and fathers? Maybe Adi.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's two questions here. I know that in Korea and Japan, they are crazy about being in like the high grades in the academic, and they're really investing in there. And I do believe that this is another cause of the less popularity of the family, and also more focusing on your own career. In Israel, we have both. We focus on the career and having a family together. We didn't neglect the family. That's why Israeli mothers are really working hard. This is true because there are many career women also, and there are, as I try to share, women they're also educated. They're also going to study more. And they invest in their studies and in their careers. So they start a family a little bit later, but they don't give up on this aspect also. Yeah, so, but in regard to this excellency ideal in both Korea or Japan or others, I think it's not so matter to us. Here we need to prove our talents or our abilities in other areas, and you can do well, for example, in the army in some area and go out to the civil society and just take it from there and succeed to go into high tech from there. It's not, or any other area. So it's not necessarily by academic success.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Daniel?
Yeah, well, it is, you do raise a very good point. I mean, it is in Korea, certainly the extraordinary emphasis on you have a pressure cooker climate where there's intense pressure to achieve academically. And actually Lyman Stone, who his research is extraordinary on the topic of fertility factors, has said that Korea has a problem with, and many East Asian countries actually have a problem with what he called workism, where workism being defined as putting work above everything else, including family. So it really seems, and I appreciate those comments that actually in Israel there's a very strong emphasis on both. So even though Israelis work incredibly hard, I don't think they suffer from workism in the sense of emphasizing work above all else. So
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. I want to get to one more question that is really touchy, and it's something we can't really find from data. Adi, feminism, the role of woman. It's a big topic around the world, family formation, having children, but Israel is kind of have a strong women. So how do you look at that? How do you feel about feminism is integrated or applied in Israel as opposed to other places?
I think that the feminism in Israel is just so typical to Israeli women. They just want to do more, and so it's just they want to be to have more rights and abilities to be mothers. They're okay. I want to work. I want to have my career. I want to have my family. I will have them all. Give me my rights. That's basically the feminism in Israel. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. We have I'm sure there are more questions, but we are especially honored to have a person with us here on the Zoom, the international president for Universal Peace Federation, and he has been to Israel a number of times. I think 40 plus times. I don't know, many times. He's been to Asia, maybe same or more times. He's been everywhere. And let us listen to some comment or questions from this gentleman, Dr. Michael Jenkins. If you be kind enough to unmute and share something.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Berg. What a wonderful program. And Dan Hess, great presentation. I know this is the biggest moment of your life where you can actually speak to the whole world about your deepest concern on birth rate. And I think you're right on. You and Elon Musk are in.
Yeah, I have good company there, right?
Yeah, once you get him to commune with you, because he's very concerned about this. Dr. Adi, we're so proud of you and all the years of our work for peace and freedom in Israel. Fascinating topic today. The birth rate in my family is 5 births per woman. So I'm very lucky. My wife and I had 5 children, And that's definitely because of religious influence. Most of the people in my family had 2 or 3, my extended family. So religion has a tremendous influence. I have a question for both Adi and Dan. Help me understand, either of you, the Arab Israelis, including the East Jerusalem, or those who maybe don't have citizenship, but they're not part of the the Palestinian area of Ramallah or Gaza. I read their birth rate was very high a few years ago, and now it's dropped down to about the same as the Israelis, or a little bit less. And then also the Israeli Jewish population, you have the Orthodox Jews, has very high birth rate, 6 or 7 per woman. Right. And then the secular Jewish birth rate is lower, but it's increasing. So if you take out the Orthodox birth rate from the Israeli Jewish population, what's the birth rate then? If you remove the Orthodox make up what percentage of the Israeli Jewish population? You know? So I'm really interested to break that down, because I'd really like to understand, and there's something to learn here too, because secular Jewish women are also increasing the birth rate, or holding steady. It's quite amazing. And so what if you take out the religious influence, or not the religious influence, but the Orthodox? I read they can 6.9 per woman or something like that. You know,
do you want to try, or shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can try. Yeah. So I think the Orthodox is about 1/4 of the population. So it does have a substantial impact. And I think if you took that out, you might be perhaps around 2.5 or 2.6 births per woman, if I had to estimate. So it does make a significant difference. But even outside of the Orthodox population, the fertility rate is quite high. So there is a kind of a culture that perhaps it emanates most strongly from the Orthodox community, but it comes, it's throughout the culture. And that's one remarkable thing, that even if just some portion of the population, is religious and has large families, that that kind of leavens the whole of society in some sense. So that sets norms much higher as well. So I think that there is a strong, somebody who, a secular couple in Israel who has 4 or 5 children is not strange at all. In fact, they have, smaller than the Orthodox average. So it's much less strange for somebody in Israel to have a large family. So that's, that helps a lot in some sense. Whereas somebody who has 4 or 5 children in Korea would be very, very unusual in this current year.
So Adi, it seems you're saying that there is a common understanding among Jewish women, especially the secular or the religious but not Orthodox, that you have to be connected to the nation, to care for the nation. You have to have 3 or more children. And I've even read where some Jewish women feel almost if they don't have 3, they have to apologize. So is that atmosphere really what you were communicating? That
it's just normal, I do believe that all of us here feel that this is just normal. It's just our natural desire to have children. I mean, not to want to have children, not wanting having children. I think it's kind of our against our original nature, I guess, of everybody in the world. I do believe that just here we can have the atmosphere and legitimacy to follow our original heart and desire. This is very natural, and yeah, it's not because of the nation, or it's just very natural. I think all what's going on is just following also the relationship with our nation, as I mentioned, and as you said, it's just the natural way. I think whatever else is not so. That's what I can share from my own, because nobody taught me this. It's just.
So what I heard you communicating earlier, and Dan also, the Israeli birth rate was down and now it's going up. It's gone up in the last few years. Isn't that correct? So why is that happening? Because the feeling among Jewish women was never different. Why is it going up? And even among secular Jewish women, what it must be, what is that reason that you can see?
Well, one thing I can say is that in Israel, the birth rate has always been pretty strong. One thing I mentioned, but it certainly looks in the chart like it has gone up somewhat, because the whole world has been going so sharply down. So Israel, whereas in the 1970s, if Israel had, around 3 births per woman, they were, somewhere in the middle of the pack. But meanwhile, in the last 50 years, the birth rate all over the world has just absolutely plummeted. I think in Korea, they were in 1970, they were at probably around 6 births per woman, and now they're all the way down below 1 birth per woman. So certainly, the gap between Israel and the rest of the world has increased dramatically. But the Jewish fertility rate, historically, maybe 100 years ago or so, was incredibly low. So Israel, certainly created a new culture of a pro-family culture, where among Jewish people, maybe several generations ago, that was much less the case.
So that was initiated by leadership and the Jewish community. Then it was spread out all over the world. So you're saying about 100 years ago that the birth rate was down, and there were efforts made to increase family, to focus on family.
Well, I think the terrible calamity the Jewish people went through in the Holocaust was surely very transformative in terms of the thinking. So in that sense, the Israeli situation may not be completely, it may be a unique situation in some sense, but I also think that it does show that where the heart and willpower is there to have children, even in a modern, urban, feminist, high income society, that can happen just mainly by determination and heart.
I've got 2 more things I want to ask, and then I'll turn it back to our moderator. But Stephen Gabb brought this up. It was my next question too. What's the birth rate among Jewish people outside of Israel? How about in the United States? I'd be fascinated to know what that is. Is that following the trend of America, or is that following the trend of the Jewish family in Israel?
Do you want to say it's Adi, or I can attempt that one also? But Adi, would you like to try?
Okay.
Adi, tell us what you think.
Me?
Yeah.
I know that it has a difference. The Jews all over the world tends to behave or to have the birth rate similar to the places they are living in, and only in Israel it's increasing. Yeah, so there is a difference.
Very interesting. I mean, how do we transfer that culture and heart to the world? That's the answer to your deep concern, Dan.
Right.
How do we transfer that heart of family and children? Boy, that's great.
Well, I would add that the contrast between Orthodox and secular Jewish people is vast. Even in the United States, I have a close Orthodox friend who called me last night to inform me of the birth of his 6th child, and so I was, he invited me to a celebration that they're having in a week But that the religiosity aspect, even among Jewish people around the world is a sharp divide, where the religious Jews have fertility rate, 3 and 4 times as high as secular Jews in the same countries.
Yeah.
Well, finally, the one thing that was shocking to me about today was the C-section. I'd never heard that before, and that women are choosing C-sections in Korea at a vastly higher rate than in Israel. And, is that to avoid, why is that? Just for convenience? I would think also C-sections would create a fear in going back and having another child by C-section.
Right. And, a lot of that factor actually, that's in some sense driven by the medical community, where, it's certainly for doctors, it's very much quicker, to do a C-section. So that's something that could be subject to change just by communication. My wife has blessed our family with 6 children, and she had the intuition to move toward, a midwife situation, use midwives instead of, in order to reduce the chance of being pushed into a C-section. And that is something that was her intuition that I think is very relevant. Once a woman has had a C-section, she is very much less likely to have further births.
Well, this is a great thing. We have a lot to learn from Israel. We better learn, or we're going to not have enough children to go to our schools. I was in Korea when the order came out that had to close 1/3 of all universities because of the birth rate. And they did. They closed 1/3 of all colleges. One of the colleges founded by our founder was under strict scrutiny, and they had to prove that they could sustain the population of their student base. And fortunately, because they have so many foreign students, international students, they could prove that they can sustain it. And there were academic standards they had to meet. They were very high in the academics. But that's a real reality that comes. And then the workforce is the next thing. People are starting to realize that. But thank you so much, Adi. It's so good to see you. Thank you for all you do. And Dan and Stefan, this is a great IAAP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins, for your kind words. And, this is an academic program, IAAP, but I have to say that you who are on the ground, this is a pre-academics. We have to do research to find out the real story. And I'm so glad to have you, Adi, here from Israel to join us in that way, be able to tell what's going on. The voice of reason coming across, and Daniel, also a father of many, and very interested in this. So I am so glad to have you on, and tell me if this is kind of what I got from this is that Israel somehow has turned the view that putting the family before money or education or career, while in many Oriental countries, the families plays second fiddle to doing what the boss says at work and advancing the money situation and so forth. Is that could we say that as just a brief? What's your comment?
Adi, go ahead. You wanna?
Yeah, I think you're right. Although Dr. Jenkins also spoke. I thought about last summer. I visited Japan with my family, and my husband's family live in the Kyushu, in a very countryside area, and I was surprised to see that I saw many families with many children. And all the time I told my husband, you see, it's not a 1.1 child for a family, they have children. And this connects to what I shared before, that I think that it's natural, and the families that are more in the countryside, more connect to just, you know, not to the career or to the urban style, but to the, you know, natural family-oriented situation. So they do have children. Of course, it's not maybe not the majority, or maybe not the process that go on like you just mentioned, but but I think that's yeah, it does happen. But also what you mentioned, that in the urban and in the urbanic society, and there's more emphasis about economical and work hours and so on. Yeah.
Thank you, Adi. All right, Daniel, your final comment is, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I really think that yeah, if you I saw a survey actually one time where they surveyed different countries of the importance that they place on you know, what is most important in life, essentially. And in many countries, family, of course, is first. I was surprised to see that in some East Asian countries, in particular Korea, family was second or third behind you know, career and financial success. So there definitely is an issue of priorities and that probably represents a dramatic shift away from families in the last generation or two in East Asia. But it's great to see the example of Israel, that it doesn't have to be that way. That, you know, because Israel is a very economically successful country, a country that is leading in many areas. So Israel does actually manage to do both at the same time. It sounds like it's a lot of work, though.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. I think any mother or father who have kids know that even one kid is a lot of work, let alone 6. But anyway, you know, there's one good point for the seminar, which is like the 3rd or 4th in our series here about demographics or population, is that there are still more questions in the chat that we couldn't get to. So we will probably in the near future have another seminar. So be sure you keep your ear to the ground and listen for the next update, that we may be able to address your specific questions. And thank you very much, Adi Sasaki, Daniel Hess. Without you, this been a very boring seminar. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. All you in the audience, all you who put in chat questions, everybody here, and also those who are behind the scenes doing the techie stuff, EJ and others. So thank you so much. God bless you, and be sure to check out the upf.org website. There are many other seminars on many other topics and links to previous recordings if you want to catch up. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Stefan, Daniel, Adi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Miri.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Aloha.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Stefan. Missed you.